Today we're going to judge the soldering skills of Reddit. We're going to find some posts that look like people are struggling with learning how to solder, and we're going to give some advice on how really to do it and to do it well. Alright, here's somebody's first ever solder. He says, feel like the bottom one is pretty decent, but they went downhill from there. Lots of practice needed. Okay, the picture doesn't have a lot of detail. The bottom looks good, especially if that's lead free. If that's leaded, it could be a little bit of a cold joint. It might be cloudy. Again, it's hard to tell in this low detail. This top one looks a little clumpy, so it's definitely a little bit cold and needs to be reflowed. And anytime I reflow a joint, I like to add flux because solder just tends to get really uncooperative without flux. So usually to add flux, I just add a little bit of extra solder because I may as well replace what gets oxidized on the end, and it keeps me from having to add standalone flux. Because while that's helpful, it's usually not necessary in through-hole soldering. And then these other joints, I can't tell if they've been soldered yet or not. If they have not, they definitely need more solder and probably a little bit more time with the iron because they don't look like they got hot enough. This person says, rate my joints. Only been soldering about a week now, practiced on some boards for a couple days before I was confident enough to handle this PCB, done with Fantic T1 Max and a chisel tip C210. Chisel C210 tip. So for this stuff, I'm not 100% that a chisel tip is the best thing to use, but that being said, I have used a chisel tip as a all-purpose tip, even for tiny stuff, so it's perfectly fine to use. I don't know if this solder is leaded or unleaded. Down here, it looks like it could be a little cold. Same thing on this edge. Everywhere, the entire thing looks like it could be a little cold. But if it's unleaded solder, that's really difficult to tell. A good lead-free joint looks like a bad leaded joint. So whether the joint is good or it's bad, you can't tell by looking, unless it's something really egregious. The amount of solder, it could be a little bit less, but it's better to have a little bit more than you need than not enough. I tend to go a little heavier on solder than I need to, just because I want to make sure I have enough. But that being said, you don't want to go overboard. I don't think this is overboard. But for a week's experience, it's definitely not bad. Tips to improve this. These look like they are probably... Well, this looks like he's soldering on a drone based on this carbon fiber frame and all these different wires. I'm going to guess this is an electronic speed controller for the motors of a little quadcopter drone. And so they probably are wide traces that carry a lot of power, which means they draw a lot of heat. So this might be a board that you'd want to preheat with hot air, or if you don't have access to hot air, a blow dryer could work, although I'm not sure if that's ESD safe. I've never used a blow dryer. You could even stick it in a toaster oven for just 30 seconds or so if you're really desperate. But if you don't preheat it, it's still completely doable. You just want to make sure you have lots of time with the iron, with the joint, but not too much time. It's kind of a balance, and you get a feel for it with experience. But something that can definitely help is to pre-tin the pad that you're about to work on, and then pre-tin the wire you're about to solder to it. And do the wire first and then do the pad. That way the pad is still hot when you're going to bring the wire to it and solder to it. And then you contact both to the iron at the same time, and they go together, and you might not need flux if you do it quickly. Though I still recommend, once the joint is made, add a little bit of flux or add a touch of solder because it has flux in it, and you get a nice clean joint. Alright, this one says first solder in over 10 years. And then he has the flare, soldering newbie. I'd call it more like rusty veteran. This was my first time soldering in over a decade, and I wanted to get some opinions on what I can do to improve. Overall, the project was a success, but I did this to get some practice before jumping headfirst into some console mods, which include micro soldering, so I want to ensure I'm as ready as I can be. If you want to practice micro soldering, the first thing I would recommend is working on SMD components. They're quite small, especially 0603 and smaller. 0804 I find is not incredibly small, but that might depend on the age of your eyes. I don't have a hard time with it, really. I can do 0603 with the naked eye, though I don't necessarily like to, but I am able to. But this soldering looks really good. There is a hair more than necessary on some of these joints, but again, it's better to have a little bit more than you need than not enough. It's definitely not in the realm of too much. This spot right here might be a little questionable. I don't know if the solder mask has been chipped away right here, or if the copper pad didn't get all the way wet with the solder. There's a couple spots up here you can see the copper didn't get all the way wet. So to improve that, just some more dwell time with the iron on these joints, and not a whole lot more, just enough that the whole pad gets covered in solder. That way you can ensure you have a nice solid joint. Overall though, this is really good. So that's all the advice I have in this video. If it's helped you at all, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. That way I know doing more of these videos is going to be worthwhile for you guys and be a real help to the community. See you guys in the next one.